Okay folks, in this lesson we take a look at the code section of the standard surface shader. So this is the material that we have it assigned to our shader ball. Let me come down to the code section. The coating section basically coats the shader on top of all other layers like base, specular, reflections, transmission, etc. The coat is always reflective, and you can use this coating section to create clear coat layers for car paint, or a sheen layer that has a sharper specular reflection compared to the underneath layer for a skin shader, for example. So in this case, let me just run the IPR and zero out my base weight so you can actually see the effect a bit better. Right now we have the specular layer, as you can see, this reflection layer. I'm just going to increase its roughness to something like 0.4, and now we have this rough specular reflection. And using the coat layer we can, let's say, add a sharp reflective coat layer. So the first parameter is weight, and as I increase the weight value to something like 1, you can clearly see now we have this reflective layer, this clear coat layer with the roughness set to 0.1. So at the time being, you can see we only have the specular component, so we get this coat layer on our specular reflection layer, and probably you need to use a lower roughness value for the clear coat layer. A weight parameter here is the amount of reflective coating on top of other shading effects, so you can control how much clear coat you want on the surface. We have the color, which is the color of the coating layer, and this normally should stay at white, but if I change it to, let's say, another color, you should be able to see this very sharp coat layer on top of our rougher specular reflection layer. Obviously, if I want to, I can increase the base weight as well, and now the coating is on top of our specular and our base component at the same time. Let me set the coat color to white again. We have obviously roughness, which controls how sharp or rough we want the coating layer to be. As I mentioned, you normally want this value to be very low, especially for something like car paint, for example. You can increase it to, let's say, something like 0.2 here. So as you can see, now we have the coat layer roughness set to 0.2, and we get the coat layer with basically rougher appearance compared to what we had before on top of our even rougher specular layer. In this case, let me set the roughness back to 0.05. Next, we have the IR value, which obviously controls the Fresnel reflectivity of the coat layer. If I use a very low IR value, like let's say 1.1, now we are going to have a very strong Fresnel effect, and that means the coating will be only visible on the edges and perpendicular angles to our viewing directions. So as you can see from this render, at the edges, at the perpendicular angles to our viewing direction, we get this very sharp coating layer, but the frontal faces showing more of the underlaying layers, which in this case is the specular layer, and less of the coat layer. And as I increase the IOR value, we're gonna start to see that the coat layer will be visible more evenly on the perpendicular and on the parallel faces. So if I use something, let's say like 1.8, now as you can see, the coating layer is more visible both on the edges and on the frontal faces. So let's use a value like 1.5 in this case. We have this normal parameter. Basically, the coat normal affects the Fresnel blending of the coat over the base. So depending on the normal, the base will be more or less visible from a particular angle. Uses for the coat normal could be a bumpy coat layer over a smoother base. Also, this could include a rain effect, a carbon fiber shader, or a car paint shader, where you could use different normals, for example using a flakes shader for the coat layer and the base layer. So in this case, if I want to actually use this normal, let me drag and drop an image. Let's load this BW52. Let's see how it's going to affect the normal. In this case, because we want to connect it to the normal parameter, we actually need to use a bump 2D or a normal map. In this case, because it's just a simple image, not a normal map, we can use the bump 2D node, use the image as the bump map, and connect the output of the bump 2D node to the normal of the code section. Let me just see this image directly. Alt W and V to connect it to the beauty. Let's just select the image and increase the scale to something like probably 2 and 2. And so you can clearly see how this image using the normal parameter is affecting our clear code layer. You can see we have this kind of like rain effect. Now let me just show you how to actually create really realistic and eye-catching car paint material using the clear code section. So I'm just going to delete this 2 map, and let's start with we need the base color, the specular layer, and also the codes layer. Let me just expand this window and see what we have. So first of all, we need to, let me just zero out the coating layer for the time being. Let's define our base color for the car paint. I have these car paint colors picked personally, so we can have some nice shaders here. Let's use this kind of purplish pinkish color here as our base color and increase the weight to something like 0.8. So that's our base layer. And for the specular color, we are going to be using a less saturated, brighter version of the color that we have defined in the base section. So I'm just going to actually copy that and paste it here and just increase its saturation, its value, and decrease its saturation a tad, and press OK. Obviously, because we are trying to create a metallic car paint, we need to increase our IOR value. So let's use a high value like 5, so we get this metallic look. And now we have a weaker Fresnel effect. The roughness can stay at about 0.4, maybe 0.3, but in this case, let's leave it at 0.4. So this is what we have at the time being. And now we can actually add our code simply by increasing the weight. And the roughness for a car paint normally should be at about 0.05, but depending on the situation, it might change. Now, as you can see, we have this nice car paint material. And if I want to basically create another color, let me just simply control drag, change the base color maybe to this shade of green, and again let's use a brighter, less saturated version of the same color. Let's connect this to the Arnold Beauty, and now as you can see, we have created another shade of car paint. Let me connect this previous one here. Now we can actually use the flakes map that Arnold provides to add some flakes to our car paint as well. So let me search for flakes, and if I connect this flake shader using Alt W and V shortcut, you can see this shader basically creates a procedural flakes normal map that can be used for materials such as car paint. In this case, what I want to do is to first of all increase the scale so the individual flakes are more and more visible basically. So I probably want to use maybe something like, let's say 50,000 here. Now we have tons of flakes. I don't know, maybe that's too much. Let's try 20,000. Okay, now because this is a normal map, we obviously need to have a normal map in between, which basically allows you to use normal maps in your workflow. So what I'm going to do is to connect this flakes normal map to the input of the normal map, which allows you to basically control your normal map and the different attributes of your normal map, and then connect the output to the code normal. Now let's connect this, Alt W and V, and see what we're going to get using these flakes. Okay, so here is our car paint material, and if I zoom in, you can see we get this nice flakes on top of the car paint. We have some fireflies that we need to increase our sampling to get rid of them, or use clamping to clamp some of these pixel values. We talk about those later on, but for the time being, this is how you create a car paint shader using the code section of the standard surface shader. So in this lesson, we discussed the code section of the standard surface shader, and I will see you in the next lesson to discuss another section.